Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the last podcast of 2021 on Angles and Attitudes. I'm Mark, and today John appears to be playing hide and seek. But John, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Mark? Are you, Jim? Good evening.
We're doing well. Today we are really happy to be joined by the former president of USA Hockey and the manager and the coach of the sled team in Chicago, the Hornets, Jim Smith. Jim, thanks for joining us and welcome to Angles and Attitudes.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Good evening, Jim.
Good morning or good afternoon, John. How are we doing?
Okay.
We're doing good. Hey, we were just talking before we got started. You can't help but, look at how the game has been affected and impacted by COVID. And unfortunately, between when we talked yesterday, Jim, and today, they had made the announcement that they had to cancel the World Juniors. So we can't really talk about that element of it as far as the progression as USA tried to defend their World Championship. Can we talk a little bit about the process of how the players are selected, scouted, how you go about picking a staff from a coach to a general manager and those types of things? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, real quick. I just want to touch before we do that. Just want to touch real quick on the COVID situation. It's unfortunate, but the World Juniors aren't the only event that's been canceled. We have a couple of our women's programs. They were supposed to play in Canada up there. That was canceled. The women's under 18 was canceled. Our sled team was supposed to play in Czechoslovakia. That was canceled. So obviously it's a worldwide pandemic, and it's, the concern of the players obviously comes first, but it is taking an effect on our sport because, a lot of these players, this is their opportunity to play in the national spotlight, the internationally, for some of them, their only opportunity. So, it's really sad that they're not going to be able to do that. Now, a lot of them will go on and play, probably in the National Hockey League and other places, but it's just sad that they're not going to be able to get that international experience the one time in their life because of this situation. So, but the process for selecting the team starts years earlier. I mean, we have a coaching staff and a scouting staff at USA Hockey, involves college coaches and NHL coaches, NHL general managers. John Van Beesbroek heads that up from our staff, and he has a group. And they started identifying those players really at an early age and through the junior program at the USHL, primarily North American Hockey League, and then the colleges, along with our national team development program. We identify those players probably a year or two out, and then we'll see how they progress to make that final selection when we bring the top, 44 players in to select the team. So it isn't just a one and done type tryout. I mean, these players are identified way before, not just for this event, but for the World Championships coming up in the spring, if those take place, and other events like the under 18 tournaments and that as we go along as the kids get older. So it's a multi-year process, and we're already identifying players at a younger age level right now to see where they're going to go, whether they're going to go the college route, the junior route, possibly someone will jump up to Canada to play, but they're following those players all the time.
Jim, just before I want to stay on the subject of this, going back to, let's say, like October, would you have ever have thought, of course, all of us are in the same boat, that back in October that this was going to happen here on December 30th? I mean, this is just a total shocker, thinking we were coming out of it, and now,
back on October 30th, no, but if you said that December 1st, I probably would have said, there's a chance, because things were starting to heat up with this Omicron, the variant, and as I saw other things like the sled tournament got canceled, and then what was it, a week ago, a few days ago, the women's tournament got canceled. Kind of saw it coming a little bit, especially when the U.S. I was upset when I think it was the U.S. had two players that were out and they had to forfeit that game against Switzerland. And I thought, we got to change the rules at the IHF, because this is just not fair, because you almost knock a team out of playoff contention for something that's not their thing. And then we had, two other teams had to, I think it was Russia and was it Sweden that had to forfeit games. And then they finally said, well, okay, now we're going to have a lot of teams this. But if that Russia and Sweden team didn't, catch COVID, then the U.S. would have been sitting with a loss, no fault of their own. And I think that's just there's got to be a better way to do it. I understand the financial part, because you can't back up the tournament with TV rights, and the schedule is such a short thing. These players have to get back to the regular teams, but there's got to be a better way than to make a team forfeit because of a worldwide pandemic. So all in all, because the whole tournament got canceled, I'm not as upset, but I would have been upset if we didn't make the playoff and tried to, capture our back-to-back gold medals, at least have a chance to do that because of this unfortunate situation.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And obviously it dominates everything we do or think about right now. And I got one more question around that. As it pivots and the NHL players are not going anymore, as scramble mode, I know like Bill Guerin, once they realized the NHL guys weren't going to, Bill Guerin stepped down as GM. Where do you guys go? You got another list, or where are you going now? You going to the AHL? How to field the team for Team USA?
Everywhere and anywhere at this point. Because, we obviously look at the colleges, but the AHL, the European leagues. But again, because the NHL isn't doing it because of COVID, the same situation is affecting these other leagues too. So we have to remember that, and we don't know what the protocols are going to be in China. I mean, we know what they are currently, but that could change tomorrow. So it's tough when the foreign country or the Olympic Committee says, okay, now if you get COVID, you're going to have to quarantine for 10, 14 days, whatever it is. Well, a lot of times these players are coming from teams that they're competing in for playoff spots and that. So if they just happen to lose, they want to go home the next day, get on a flight that night and be back on their team the next night. And if you've got to stay in that country for another 3 or 4 days, then that decision for that player to come and play on the team, that's a big factor in there, because he's going to be able to return to his team because of the situation. So getting players is going to be a challenge. We'll put a good team on the ice, but there are going to be some challenges.
No doubt. That's why and that's one of the major revenue drivers as far as ratings are concerned for the Winter Olympics is skating, women's figure skating. And when the NHL players were there, the ice hockey, obviously driving a lot of revenue for advertisers and all of those other things then as well.
Huge. And so it's a tough decision. And as you know, the NHL players wanted to go, and Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, they were supporting that. Before the COVID factor kind of drew in, but they were supporting for the team to go. They made that decision, they announced it, and then had to withdraw it because, when you shut down NHL games, you're talking about these are businesses. When you're shutting down this many teams and this many games at this point in the season, a whole lot of, I don't want to get into the details, but a whole lot of factors. I mean, it's like like here in Chicago, the United Center. Well, that building doesn't just sit empty. I mean, they've had a lot of lost revenue from that building over the last 2 years because of COVID, with not only hockey, but with basketball, with concerts, with other events that go in there. So those dates aren't just sitting empty. So it's, to reschedule these games. And then if you don't have, even though they took the 2 weeks off, you've got to try to reschedule the games that they're now canceling to take another 2 weeks off. From a business perspective, it's tough to do that. And
the rescheduling part, the rescheduling part has got to be just unbelievable now, because we have the doubt and the unknown that's coming our way. Exactly.
Yeah. So to pivot, Jim, off of that, the Blackhawks, the 2010 through 2015, the growth of, or how popular the game became in Chicago, and everybody wanted to play. And I'm sure the numbers for USA Hockey reflected that. So now a challenge for USA Hockey with that game not being on. The idea was, hey, we're going to be on ESPN now. We're going to be able to get more viewers. More people are going to see the game's going to become more popular. We should be able to drive more kids in to be able to do that. How do you attack that as USA Hockey to still try to drive new membership when, now you're taking a break, 2 weeks? There's nothing on TV again in your prime. Hey, I got skates. I want to go to the rink. It's Christmas and all of those other things.
Well, you talk about the NHL not playing during that 2 week break period?
Right. Well, just the game not being as visible now because of COVID, as you try to bring more skaters and more members to USA Hockey. It's
going to be a challenge because, obviously we get a spike every 4 years when we do play the Olympics, and particularly in the different markets that are kind of new, like the markets we had in the South for a long time, to bring new kids into the game. It's going to be a challenge to do that, but I think the NHL is probably going to, during that 2 week time frame, find a way to play those games again. So the NHL will be back on TV, and I still think it's going to be exciting. The Olympics, it may not be as exciting, but I think we've got a lot of great players that'll be playing for Team USA and other countries also that I still think it'll be pretty exciting. But obviously we take a dip if we don't have that. But for, like you said, in Chicago, during those years they won the Stanley Cup, 2010, I think it was 13 or 15, saw a huge spike in the Illinois youth hockey group because kids said, oh yeah, I want to do that. I want to try that because there was so much excitement, especially in 2010 when they hadn't won it for so long. And they had just recently put it back on TV, which was a huge increase for us, back here in Illinois. So it's going to be a factor, but I think we'll overcome it.
Well, Jim and Mark, I got to ask Jim, this spike that Mark elaborated on from 2010, the spike reminds me of the mid 70s when I was playing out of Franklin Park. Mark played for the Jets and I played for Holy Cross. It reminds me of the spark when they were building all these rinks. Could you compare the increase in hockey of the 2010s to back then? Because I remember you starting out back in those days. I think you were Colton Park Ridge in the late, early 80s, correct?
That's right. That's where I started out, was Park Ridge. But they have roofs on the building nowadays too, so it makes a huge difference.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Jim.
It is.
No offense taken.
Yeah, because there were not many rinks. I mean, there were probably 15, 20 rinks, the main rinks that everybody skated out. The numbers were, probably 25% of the numbers that we have today. And it was just a different game. We had a lot of outside rinks back in those days. I remember back in Park Ridge, we had, 2 or 3 outside rinks, and you played, a lot of your league games outside, at that time. So nowadays, nobody even plays outside anymore. It's unfortunate, but the weather isn't, what it used to be like either. I remember making ice in late November, right after Thanksgiving, and it would stay all the way through March. And now you probably.
Yeah, I was hoping to go over to the flying carpet over there in Mannheim. Yeah.
Flying carpet. That's. I skated there for Notre Dame High School. I played for a club in my junior year, and that was our home ice. It was a flying carpet.
I remember we had tryouts for Norwich Hockey Association.
Norwich Hockey,
we skated in one direction, and the guy said, "We'll go backwards." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This is my second day on the ice, and you want me to go backwards?" I barely made it down and back. And then the beauty part of that kids today we were talking before, Jim, about entitlement with the kids in the game today. But it was almost as important on the coin flip to pick which way you were going to start the game. So you had to win in the third period. If you were losing, that you were down 2 goals and you were skating into the wind, literally.
And who was going to shovel the snow?
That's exactly right. Or the other, just, one more, the old Park, right? You used to play at Old Park and the sides weren't filled. At Ridgeland, and right, you play 2 periods and you'd be like, oh, finally we can go inside and warm up. And then they'd put 3 goals on you in the first 5 minutes of the third period because you had just warmed up. You were freezing to start the third period, and they would score 3 goals and you'd end up losing by those 3 because they had that little way that they would do that to you, right?
Yeah, John? I played for UIC for 3 years, and one year that was our practice facility, was there at Oak Park, and we didn't have the sides, but I remember playing some scrimmage games there. And I just remember it was so cold that you would take your gloves and you would put your fist in your gloves just to keep them warm and just kind of hold your stick. And you were praying to the good Lord that nobody passed you the puck because your stick would go flying out of your hands.
And now the kids that you have are carrying around $300 sticks, and the bags have wheels. And obviously we can go on and on about that. But the game, as it's changed, probably what I would take a look at as a coach, and John, you could to this as well as Jim, I look at sometimes the parents being the biggest challenge in terms of the growth of the game.
Yes, and yeah, to an extent. I think the game's changed too. And I think it really changed, and I know we were going to talk about this with the ADM, the American Development Model. I think the game changed 12 years ago when USA Hockey instituted that program, because prior to that, it was, I used to call things, everything was a trophy-based mentality. Everybody wanted to win trophies. And so everything was geared to that. When the younger kids were playing 70, 80 games as mates, and it was, 4 games to 1 practice. And the American Development Model came in and kind of did a whole rethink of the entire process on how we do not only youth hockey, because it's now graduated to most of the other sports within the US OPC movement have adopted the USA Hockey ADM program for them, whether it's golf, swimming, baseball, lacrosse. All of them have adopted some kind of adaptation of what USA Hockey started. So the kids, I think, are happier today. I think they're having more fun, but I still think there's a lot of parent involvement that needs to be, and I shouldn't say parent, I should say adult involvement that needs to be kind of refocused on. The priority should be the kid first, and everything else should come second.
You know, Jim, that's a great point that we're talking about now, because just in talking to some parents the other day, being on the Rules and Ethics Committee that with Jack Weinberg, again, do you feel still to this day that it's that Jim, my Jimmy's better than your Johnny? You know, where the parent is always, you know, still looking at the stopwatch. Why is my kid on the third line? He should be on the first line. He scored 56 goals in the basement. Why isn't he on the first line?
Yeah, but that's part of youth sports. I mean, that's always going to be part of youth sports, whether it's baseball or soccer. I don't really consider. I think the biggest thing that I see in ice hockey, probably in other sports too, is that, and it's a societal thing that I see, is that people now can do and say things with no consequences. And so you see parents and people in the stands berating a 14-year-old new official. You see coaches screaming at other adults. And when all of this is going on, all of the players kind of take that and then they kind of adopt that same behavior in some cases. And they're looking at it and saying, well, this is my adult mentor that I'm looking at, and he's doing and saying this. Maybe it's okay for me to do that. And so that's where I think the change needs to take place. With all of us from all aspects, not just the parents. I think coaches, we have to put a zero tolerance. We say that, but we have to really enforce it. I think leagues, administrators, and I think a big part of it is, you know, if you really take a look at our core of our business, the rink owners are the core of our business. I mean, without them, we don't exist. And so if you own a business, no matter what your business is, let's just say, John, you own a manufacturing company and you have you have 5 people in the front office. If someone were to come in and start screaming at your people in the front office, you would not tolerate that. You would either ask them to leave or call the police. Right. In an ice rink, for some reason, people can go in and yell and swear and that, even at minors or even other adults, and we tolerate it for some reason. Either we sit back and we don't say anything, or, you know, even the facilities don't say, you're not going to do that in my place of business. That's not who we are. That's not what we represent. That's not our model. So that's why I think we need to do a lot more to get this thing under control.
It's a very interesting point, because I look at that now. You bring up, you know, we were talking earlier, being down the street from the Leafs Ice Center and being part of the Leafs Club for a long time. You geared up for security once you got Blackhawk Cup, when you got those round robin games for Blackhawk Cup. And to your point, do we need all of that security and guys walking around with jackets if we did a better job policing the first 48 games of the Nihil season or the Central States season that didn't allow those behaviors to bubble up? And to your point, you know, to allow the kids to see that, because that automatically stamps to the kid, to the player, well, if my coach does it and you tell me to follow my coach, now you're going to make a differentiate and say, well, you follow your coach on the forecheck or in a penalty kill, but when he's yelling at the ref, you don't follow what he's doing. And that's really hard, like you said, for a kid to make that differentiate. And that's not fair for a player to have to try to do that. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Because when we hire more security for, let's say, the big high school games or the big, you know, playoffs or whatever, that's a reactionary position that we're taking. The problem, the core of the problem, starts in September, day one of the season, when the expectations, whether the organization or the league or the rink says, this is the behavior that we're going to accept, and this is the behavior we're not going to accept. I mean, I was sitting last night and I got a text sent to me by, I forget who, but it was a video of a junior game in Canada where the player attacked the referee. It was on a face-off, and I don't know what happened or what was said, because it was a faraway view, but you could see it. He attacked the referee, and the 2 linesmen came in and tackled the player, kept him to the ice. 2 police officers walked on the ice, turned the player on his stomach, put him in handcuffs, took him down and arrested him, took him to the police station in his skates. First time I've ever seen the police come on the ice and put somebody in handcuffs. And that's what our game, you know, unfortunately in some cases has gotten to. So you're right. The key is expectations, in my view, you know, at the beginning of the season, and everybody has to play a part in making that happen, whether it be, you know, a lot of times people blame the referees. The referees are reactionary. They don't cause people to yell in the stands. I mean, they may say the call's bad or whatever, but that's a behavior that somebody did on their own. And so they have to make that call by throwing somebody out of the, you know, off the ice. You know, coaches, I've seen coaches on the bench where if a player says something or swears at the referee, that coach benches that player for a period and says, that's not who we are. That's not what we represent. And that's not what our club represents or who we are. And so the coaches have to play that role. I've seen other coaches encourage it because they're the ones screaming. And then when their players do it, they're like, yeah, go there. Parents in the stands, when you're sitting there, a lot of times people won't want to say anything. It's part of it, again, back to societal, not to get too deep, but when you're sitting in the stands, sometimes you don't want to say anything, but the other times, the players, people say, ref, you didn't see anything. Well, you can hear everything that's going on in the rink. I ref all the time. You can hear and see everything. It's whether or not you choose to, to react to it. And so when parents are in the stands and they hear this, we've got to be able to stand up as a group and say, that's not what we want around our kids. It's just not going to be accepted. And it's a tough battle to fight because it's not just ice hockey. I see it in other sports too, and other portions of society too. And we all know what we're talking about. You can just say what you want and no consequences.
Right.
And it's a tough thing to battle.
Jim, are the referee situation, I've been reading a lot where the referee situation all over, the 50 states is becoming an issue where we really do have major shortages. It
is an issue across the country. The new president, Mike Trimboli, just put together a task force. It's going to be a challenging task force for sure. I happen to have some thoughts on why we have a shortage of referees. I think that one of the main reasons for people I've talked to is this COVID situation when everybody was staying home. A lot of the level 3 officials, some level 4s, but primarily level 3s, I think, where they're basically down across the country, have said, you know what, I don't need that type of abuse anymore. So I think abuse is probably one of the biggest reasons. They're saying, I reinvented my family. I now got reacquainted with my family during this. I'm not going out 4 nights a week and get yelled at. It doesn't matter. You could double my salary. I'm just not going to put up with that. I think the other thing that one of the unintended consequences that happen with the ADM is that the younger age levels, like the mites, that used to be the training ground for officials. And because, used to play 70, 80 games, well, that gave a lot of opportunities for a lot of 13, 14, 15-year-old officials to go, because by the time the guy, the young referee, boy or girl, pays their registration fee, buys a sweater, a pair of pants, skates, helmet, it's different than their playing gear. By the time they do that, they got to ref lower level games, lower pay, probably 6, 7, 8 games before they get just to break even. And so in their first year, they go out on the ice, they're only getting X number of games because now the mites aren't playing, which is great. I mean, the ADM has done a lot of things for station-based practices, more skill development, and all the other facets of the game, and taking away those 80-game schedules, which is terrific for the lower age groups, the mites and the squirts, but it's taken away the training ground. So they have nowhere to ref. So after the first year, they say, well, I only refed 8 games during the year. So, I'm not going to do it in year 2. And that's where we have a big drop off. The number of level 1, and everybody's excited to go ref, but after 1 year, they say they drop off. So we have to fix that. And there's other factors. The biggest, like I said, is probably the abuse that the officials are taking. I'd like to see, we have a mentor program. Some states do it better than others, where you would go out and then somebody goes out on the ice, an adult goes out and follows that young official around. I'd like to do a reverse mentoring program where even all the way up to a Bantam, you take a first-year official and you still have 2 referees on the ice, but that first-year official, instead of him going out and officiate the game, he goes out in full uniform and just skates with one of the officials right next to him. Now the official's making the calls, the offsides, the penalties, whatever, but he skates over to the penalty box with him, and he learns about how do you interact with coaches, what about proper signaling, proper positioning. So he's on the ice, he gets that feel, even though he's not repping the game. And then we come up with some grant money to pay that young official to go out and do that. So maybe every level 1 official has to go out and do 5 games on a reverse mentoring program. Not that he's reffing the game, but he's shadowing a regular official. I think that would be one step.
It's interesting that you bring that up because you start to put that, you mentioned, corporate America, and you talk about the ADM model. And if your son or daughter practiced piano for 3 minutes a week relative to what they would touch the puck in 80 games, or 60 games, do you think your child is going to be a better pianist or flutist or whatever? They get frustrated with that and then they quit. And you lose in the same way you lose that child because there's 2 kids on the team. They win 60 games. Like John said, they don't score 54 goals in their basement. They score 54 goals and are doing their, they get 4 goals a game, and 2/3 of the team never touches the puck. And the frustration is
And they
there.
did that. That's all based on science because they did that study. And that's when the ADM came into existence, is that at the younger age level, there was 1 or 2 studs on the team and they would control the game and the other players would kind of go through the motions and, participate in the play, but they really didn't get the puck touches in that. So now with the station-based practices and that your puck touches during an hour of practice is just phenomenal. And the other thing that we realized was, and they've done this in other sports, but when you go look, we still do it today. I was at a rink about a week ago and I watched a practice and I'm like, half of the ice never got used. And I'm like, what a waste. I mean, you could bring another team out here. You still do you still do 2-on-1s and breakouts on half sheets of ice. So you can you divide it the long way or whatever, but it's just a waste that we're not utilizing more, ice utilization. We've done a lot of good things, but I think we still need a way to go. And that's what, we have to convince coaches that's it. And the coaches then have to convince the parents, because parents want to see games. Let's face it. I mean, they don't like going to the rink to just watch a practice. I mean, games are obviously more fun, but for the best development of that child,
Right.
is to not only develop his skills, but also tactics of the game, like his game IQ, or, not in addition to physical fitness in that, but also, the coaches have to teach, motivation and nutrition and off ice, that's just as important. So I just think the ADM has been tremendous in as far as changing the game at the younger age levels. And it's really a lifelong, it's not just the younger age levels. It goes all the way through. It's a cradle to grave type thing. Even adult players can refocus themselves on, and I think people enjoy the game more when they do better at it. Because obviously anything that you do, if you don't like it and you say, well, I suck at this, you don't really stick with it that long. But if you say, I'm getting better, I've set some goals, I'm getting to reach those goals, I'm getting to the next ones, that's what's really important. And I think that's why people stay in the game. And I think we've seen our retention, that's proved in our numbers on our retention prior to the last year and a half when we've had some downside with the COVID situation. But prior to that, we were setting, all-time attendance or all-time registration records, I think like 8 or 9 consecutive years, not just at the 8 and under, but at the Pee Wee level, the Bantam level. High school has grown, our disabled sports has grown. So it's been, pretty successful, I think.
No doubt.
Jim, I want to bring up something. Mark's son does the first shift hockey out of Crystal Lake there in Geneva on that. And of course, my son coached at St. Viator. In regards to go back to your thing about the coaches, have you seen great strides in the coaching aspect? Meaning, you see the differences now where, before
Yeah. Repping games, I can see the skill level of the players much different than it was 15 years ago. Just the little things on puck control, a puck, how to handle the puck along the boards, the backward skating, just all the little technical parts of the game, I think have improved. And that's direct, in my opinion, a direct result of coaches. And I think coaches, if you go to these, Jimmy Clare, here in Illinois and other states also, they put on, I think COVID has forced a lot of the clinics to go virtual, but they've like tripled in the number of clinics that they're putting on now, which I think is important because you can always take something away from every clinic that you go to. In the past, I'm saying maybe 10 years ago, before the advent of the Zoom calls and everything, you go and say, I got to go to a clinic 8 hours, and you go and you kind of get, you listen to somebody talk for, and get a couple of different speakers in. Now with the advent of technology, they're able to, do specific like 1 hour sessions or 2 hour sessions on a specific tactic of the game, whether it be a defensive skill, maybe just goaltending. So if you're interested, you can go online and they're putting all these coaching things on, and the coaches, from what I've seen, a lot of them are hungry for this information because they want to teach their players to get better. They want to know how to teach that to the player. And so, we've had a lot of coaches that have played the game, and most of them can translate that to a player and how to do. Some need to be taught that, because not every coach is the best, or not every player is the best coach. But I see them grasping for that information, and it's become available in large part because of ADM, because the coaching, it's really, develop the player, develop the coach, and administratively buy into the program. So those 3 components, which really control our game, all have to be on the same page, and I think they are.
Well, I can attest to that without tooting a horn or whatever. Like John said, my son is 26, so he grew up in that, played junior, played some ACHA, and now is coaching. So you're starting to get that next generation who have had a lot more exposure to the game coming behind the bench now, which is obviously great. Where, you know, X number of years ago, you had guys who had never learned how, never skated. And you're like, well, where are we going to find our coaches? Where in baseball, everybody played baseball, everybody dribbled the basketball or whatever it was. So you could always find somebody who had relative knowledge of the game itself, where here, you know, you can't just put on a pair of gym shoes and run. You got to be able to skate. And now we mix that in for our coaches and all those other things. So you do begin to see the evolution, no doubt about it. And the skill development. We had Eddie Lack on a few weeks ago, and we had talked about the fact that the Finns and the Swedes had done such a great job of developing goalies, those small countries. And you were getting, you know, why were you getting goalies out of there? And then, like, to your point, Jim, for a longest time, right, as a coach in USA, you're like, okay, we run all our drills, and you look behind you, you're like, oh, there's our goalie. What do we do with our goalie, right?
Exactly.
You throw shots at him, or you tell him go side to side. And well, John can speak to that more. But though that light went on in talking to him about how the Finns and the Swedes did that, back to the model.
Yeah, and that's why those, Finland and Sweden, small countries, not a lot of hockey players. I mean, we have many times the number of players that they have. So you would think statistically we should be, but they, you get back in the big games and it's all the small area battles that they seem to win in those crucial games, and it had for years. Now that's not so true anymore, because I think we're seeing after 12 or 13 years of the ADM, I think our players are now on our national teams that have gone through this skill development. Our players are much more skilled than they were 10 or 12 years ago. And I think that's a result of, the players, but also the coaches teaching the small things of the game. And I think the players have more fun when they perform better, and they want to perform better, and the coaches want to teach this. But like you said, with the goalies, a lot of time I coached high school for, Maine South High School for, a long time ago in the early 90s. And you're right. Our goalies, we kind of like, well, I'll go down and take a couple shots on the goalie, because I didn't know what else to do, because I wasn't a goalie. I wasn't a goalie coach. But if I had that same situation today, I would find somebody that's skilled in goalie and have them go out there and work specifically with the goaltenders.
For
It's
sure.
interesting to bring that up. Even I jumped on the ice the other day with my son, and he was talking to, he had a goalie out there, played junior and got hurt. He was playing AAA, played CompuWare and Little Caesars and all that. And actually, moved away at 16 to go play up in Michigan. But he told him, he says, Chase, you got free time. He goes, every day I get calls from goalie parents looking for instruction, and again, all he did was between the blue lines, put the nets in, and had 4 goalies who probably got 45 minutes worth of hands-on time that, unfortunately, at a club level, that's going to take 3 practices to get that much one-on-one time with that goalie. So,
yeah, we still have a lot of work to do. And as you know, I mean, we got a lot of work to still do, but as you know, like if you get into not just international competition, but in those crucial games, goaltending is what keeps you, getting into those final championship games.
And again, back to having fun, and having fun is winning or having a chance. And if your goalie's not any good, and John, defer to you on that one, going in, you probably don't have a really good chance if you don't have somebody in the blue paint.
Yeah, for sure. You need that guy who's you got to stop that puck. Jim, I got to ask you a question I've always wanted to ask you for years when I ran into you, but you've been in every facet of this game, from coaching, refereeing, and of course, the Hornets sled team, which we'll touch on, and of course, being an administrator. Is there any one thing that Jim Smith could say, hey, this is what I really like, the specialty? Because Jim, you've covered every part of the game. Anything that you'd like to, kind of elaborate on, because the resume is unbelievable.
Well, I've had fun along the way. I've had the opportunity to, I always tell people, a lot of the reasons, because I got a weak bladder. Every time I'd leave a room to go to the washroom, somebody'd say, well, he's not in the room, let him do it. Yeah, put him as the chair of that committee. So I'm kind of trying to get my bladder in shape. But no, I just think probably the most fun I have, I mean, obviously with disabled hockey, I absolutely love that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But refereeing, I like too. I really think the best place, I always tell people the best place to watch a game, I ask the question, where's the best place to watch the game? And number one is obviously to be on a bench as a player or a coach. But number 2 is to be on the ice. I mean, because you get the feel of the game. And if you really dedicate yourself to officiating, You get the feel of, it doesn't matter if it's a lower level 8 and under game or whether it's a college game, you get the feel for that particular game. You get to talk to the players, you get to have interaction with the coaches, and the better coaches, you know, you can barb a little bit back and forth. It's nothing, you know, but that's expected. I mean, that makes for a good contest. And I look forward to that challenge. I mean, when I go out and referee, you're just part of the game. It just makes you feel like when you're on the ice, I don't know what it is. I think that's why people play the game of ice hockey. It's kind of like you're almost not flying. It sounds kind of corny, but you're free. I mean, you're skating, and you're in the game. You're still part of it. You're too old to play. You know, I tried men's league after I got out of college, and I didn't like getting home at 12 at night and being up till 4 in the morning because you're all wound up. So I thought, you know, refereeing will still get you on the ice. So that's probably the most fun I've had, you know, through the years, is refereeing, aside from the disabled portion of it.
I got one question, and my son required that I ask. He's got U16s and U18s. Just more around, as you guys look to institute different sort of rules from an experimental standpoint, like U16, U18s, you can't ice the puck in a shorthanded situation. How does that process develop in terms of when you look at data and say, all right, we want to institute this because we want to make the players bring this skill or develop this skill?
It's a committee that we have. It's called the Rules Committee, and it's composed of a lot of officials, but also coaches, some administrators, some affiliate presidents, some different people from some hockey knowledge, some NHL people, college people, and they look at sometimes it's followed by what the international community has done in passing rules, and sometimes the NHL, and see if it makes sense to do it, because not every rule that we have is the same as the NHL, but some make sense. Some are experimental. We've seen it go back and forth on the delayed offside, you know, years ago, and then not offside, and now we're back to immediate offside, you know, except for particular divisions and things like that. You know, I don't think there's any black and white answer, but it's really a group of very knowledgeable people. They do a lot of vetting, a lot of input. It's a year-long process actually it's a 4-year process now before any rule gets instituted. Okay. But it's voted on every 4 years. We used to have it every 2 years. I was a big proponent of, I didn't think the game was that broken, and I was a big proponent of changing the rules every 4 years instead of every 2, because it was too confusing for everybody. Every 2 years would be changing. Now it's every 4 years. And this year was, you know, a new rule year. So some major changes in there. I think we're looking at maybe some of the rules that we had for some of the age divisions, such as the immediate offside. There's been a lot of talk about that. But there's a lot of input from the coaches who believe that for skill development, that was a better rule to put into place. More challenging, makes the player think. Same thing with the icing. I'm not all in favor of that on icing. I'm more of a traditionalist, but I know the reasoning behind it was not to reward, you know, for a penalty, not to reward that team. I just like to keep, I think, especially at the younger age levels, I've seen a lot of whistles this year. Maybe it's just going to take a little bit of time with the immediate offside to get in, you know, to get acclimated to it. But I like the game to continue to move. Yes. You know, and I see a lot of times where the puck's in there and you know the other team's going to get it. Why in the world are we blowing it offside? I mean, you could have kept the game going and save another minute of ice time. And you multiply that to the, you know, the course of a game, you might get 5 more minutes of playing time.
Sure.
You know, actual, you know, continuation of playing time. So.
No, I watched the game at Johnny's with the U18s, and there's 2 sides to that, obviously building some skill, but then you don't want to be that defenseman's parent who ate it on the boards while killing a penalty because he didn't want to ice the puck and they end up scoring on you. So there's always 2 sides of that. Or he chips it out and it's icing and you come back down and you have, like you said, 15 seconds of actual play. And the only guy who's getting exercise right now is the linesman because he's running up and down, grabbing the puck and bringing it back. So there's you know, obviously 2 sides to that. So I appreciate you clarifying.
I always tell the committee too, you know, when I was back being president and that, I said, you know, it doesn't matter what rule you come up with. You know, we sit in a room and we vet this out, you know, trying to think of all the different things and consequences and it's going to affect the game. Is it going to improve it or not improve it or whatever? You know, you tell the players what the rules are, and within 15 minutes they get it. Mm-hmm. So it could be delayed offside, it could be immediate offside. It doesn't matter what it is. They're going to figure it out and they're going to play the game to that level.
And it's just a matter of that consistency. I think that was one of the things you mentioned earlier about the officials that I felt bad for them, is the fact, especially when the last group that I coached were mites. And so obviously you got that 12-year-old out there who, for fear, he was in a right spot doing what he's supposed to do, but just doesn't have that confidence yet, or to make the call. You know, I just tell him, if that's what you think, make the call and make everybody believe it. That's all. Whether it's right or wrong, all we're asking for is that you believe that that's what the call is. It's the indecision of, like, you know, looking at the coach and letting one coach, and I understand it, right? The guy with the bigger mouth gets the call because he intimidates that 12-year-old.
But you have to be held, accountable. And right now, unfortunately, because of the situation with the officials, you're assigned games based on availability as opposed to accountability. And because, I mean, I was doing a game the other day, and I won't mention any names, but I was doing a game, and a young person walks into the room. He's a high school senior. And I just talking to him, I said, well, how many games you got this weekend? You know, it was Saturday and Sunday. He says, I got 14. I said, 14? How do you ref 14 hockey games? And this went from squirts all the way through high school and one AAA game. And I said, how do you do 14 games and give that 14th game the same level of efficiency and dedication that you did the first game you did Saturday morning? He said, well, they're short on referees, so they're just, you know, taking anybody. So we have to change that. The other thing, I think, just back on officials, and I don't want to belabor the point, but, you know, we have to find a way to coexist, number one, but we have to find a way for the officials to be held accountable for their performance. It's a paid position. And my belief is that we should have some kind of system, and I don't know how to do it at this point, but there are ways to do it. That you should be rated in every game. How did you do today? You do it in your job. I mean, if you do a crummy job, you know, and consistently do a crummy job, you shouldn't be given more games or more work, you know, to do. It's the same thing here. And the coaches have to be objective, and they have to, you know, they should be really evaluating the referees. I don't think a referee should see a team more than 3 times during a season. You know, once we get the numbers back up, but there's all kinds of things I think we can institute, but everybody has to play a part. You know, parents can't yell. Coaches have to objectively, you know, rate the officials. Officials have to want to learn and get better. And if they make mistakes, you know, to get better at it and not just be there because there's a paycheck at the end of the day, or because I can do 14 games and make $400 this weekend, you know, because it doesn't, you know, I understand the parents' frustration because we have some, I'm not berating officials because I love officials, they're my brothers, but we have some that aren't doing a good job, quite frankly. And those need to be removed from the game or enticed to find a way that they can do a better job and be held accountable for the performance they give, whether it's a mite game on a Saturday morning or a high school game on Saturday night. The level should be the same type of dedication.
And I think because I do want to, obviously, near and dear to my heart also is the sled program, but it's probably more so from an official standpoint as an old coach, was just simply just being in the right position. You're not going to get the trip or the hook right every time. The thing is just, like you said, hey, here's my evaluation. He missed 3 offsides simply because he was out of position. And that's the frustrating part as a coach sees, you know, and the guys who are really good interact just like you said, and they'll tell a kid, hey, look, stop it. I'm going to allow this in front of the net, but I'm giving you a warning right now, or he'll come to the bench or get the captain and go, hey, captain, spread the word to the team.
You're right. Players respect that.
Out in front.
Sure.
And one time, and as a coach, you know, it goes back to being a coach with the players. As long as the expectation is set, we all knew what he was going to call, and we didn't do what we were told, and now we're going to have to pay the price for that. And I think that's coaches need to be held accountable for that, the way the officials are, and parents too, because officials are going to miss calls. But
absolutely, but if a coach knows that that official's working his tail off, he's in position. Now, you may not agree with the call, but he was right on the line and he saw it differently than you. You're not going to argue with him. I mean, you may say something like, hey, I think you blew that one. He said, hey, you know, that's your opinion, but I saw it this way, you know, and you talk to him like a human being and not like a police, you know, like, you do as I told, you know, you're told. That's what we got to change and get back to.
That's the thing. And we're going to go to sled after this.
Yeah.
It's just simply, we're paying a guy and he's behind the play in a mite game. That's the one that sets everybody's, you know, a hair on fire.
Yeah.
But
Jay, I was gonna tell Jim, something dear to your heart, the passion for this Hornets sled team. I got a question for you though. Does the Hornets name come from the original Park Ridge Hornets?
Now, why would you say that?
Yeah, because I remember you with the Park Ridge Hornets.
Well, if you look at our logo, it's pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the name came from, actually.
Before the Park Ridge Express, it was the Park Ridge Hornets.
Well, yeah, I was there during the transition between Niles Rangers and the Park Ridge Hornets when we merged. Yeah,
But let's talk about your beloved Hornets for sure.
Well, it's just that the Hornets I just happened to coach because JJ O'Connor, who really has been instrumental, he's really the godfather of sled hockey, or at least the person who put the whole disabled program on its feet when he became the chair 20 years ago, and really increased all of the 6 different disciplines. Actually, at the time there were only, I think, 4 disciplines when he first started. He added the warrior discipline and also added the blind discipline just recently. But the other one is we had special hockey in place, and right now, like in the Chicago area, special hockey, and these are for individuals with cognitive disabilities. We have the largest program in the country with the Chicago Blackhawks special hockey program, run by Melanie Freeman. Used to be run by Amy Lepeau, who's now the overseer of all the special hockey in the country on the disabled section. And we have standing amputee, and most of those players, obviously don't have a limb, but they play on regular able-bodied teams. We have the deaf, hard of hearing, which is obviously Stan Mikita's group, and Jeff, Wisconsin coach Jeff Sauer was a big part of that. And then we have the Warriors, which are for veterans that have disabilities or PTSD or whatever. So that's been the largest growing segment. And then we have sled hockey, which is probably the most visible because it's an international sport with the Paralympics. And that's just been, it's exciting to watch. It's exciting. I think you guys have played it before. It's challenging for sure. JJ said, he was chair of the section, and he said, you're president of the organization and I'm chair of the section, and we don't have a sled team here in Chicago, a youth sled team. We had the RIC Blackhawks, but that was all for adults. So we started at 17 or 18 years ago, and then raised some money. We don't charge our kids anything. And since then we've added GLASA, Great Lakes Sports Adaptive Association. They have a team, an adult. They don't have a youth team this year because they're a little low on members, but they have an adult team. We have a Central Illinois team called the Thunder. So we're growing in Chicago, or in the Illinois area, to put more teams together. My little Hornet team, we've got an adult team and a youth team. It's great. These kids are fantastic. It's they've got, if you ever work with the disabled people, they've got an attitude that's just inspirational. They just they look at life differently because they've been through so many challenges. So a lot of the little things that may affect you and I on a daily basis fly right by these kids. They just see life differently. They see the positive in everything that they do. So that's what's so much fun working with them. So, and we were lucky enough to have one player, Brodie Roybal, who we kind of tout a little bit, but we got him when he was 8 years old. He's a double amp. And he has, he was a double amp with no stumps. So it was cut right off at the waist. His leg, he was born that way. So he's been crawling on his arms his whole life. And so as soon as he got in a sled, when he was 8 years old, Patrick Byrne, who played on the RIC, played actually on a 2002 gold medal team, said that this kid's going to be one of the best players in the world. At 8 years old, he identified him, told JJ that, and we got him. He came to play for us. We're good friends with the family, and he's turned out to be probably the top player, if not with him and Declan Farmer as the 2 top players in the world. And he's so strong because he's crawled on his arms his whole life. So his forearms and his arms are as big as my thighs. I mean, he's a beast, and his wrist shot, either left or right, is probably harder and faster and more direct, or he can thread a needle on a net than any high school player I've seen take a slap shot. He's phenomenal. And I think some of your listeners probably have seen our national team players play. It's phenomenal to watch. So just a little story about the Olympics too, and what makes it so exciting is that in 1998, the U.S. really didn't have a team. It was sort of on the auspices of the USOC at that time, but not really. And we weren't going to send a team. So Japan, who was hosting the Olympics, Nagano, sent over a check for $25,000. They put a team together, a bunch of guys who played on the team, and they lost every game by like 5 or 8 goals or whatever it was. So in 2002, we were hosting in Salt Lake City, so they got an automatic seed, and everybody predicted them to be in last place. They ended up winning the gold medal in 2002. In 2006, we went to Torino. I happened to be there with JJ, and in the semifinal game, the referee from Norway blew a call. I'll still say it to this day, and we didn't get the gold medal, or we would have won that. But we came back in 2010 in Vancouver and won the gold medal, and then in Sochi in 2014 won the gold medal, in 2018 won the gold medal, and then hopefully in Beijing, which they're not allowing any fans, so we can't go, but hopefully in 2000 we can keep our streak going. Probably have the best, we do have the best sled program in the world. That's because the architect of our sled program, JJ, who's here from Chicago, instituted a lot of different programs within USA Hockey, kind of like girls hockey in the early days. Because if you go to, like, if you want to try a sled hockey program, they get new kids to come out and try sled hockey. How do you do it? If you try a learn to skate program, you go to the rink and say, can we borrow your figure skates for open skating that you rent? Well, they don't have anything. So we started a sled lending program. So we bought, USA Hockey bought 50 sleds, and now we ship them out. Anybody that wants to put on a clinic, we'll ship them out free of charge, and then they ship them back, you know, after the weekend's over. So you can get 50 or 25 kids out on the ice to try it, and then you can build a program from there. And develop grant programs, started a player development camp, similar to the boys and the girls player development camps. We never had that before. We started a development team. The reason that we're so good is because we're young. We're playing against a team like Norway, whose average age is like 36. Our average age in Beijing, 2018, I think it was like 21.2 or something. It's just ridiculous. I mean, the age difference. So you've got really boys going out there against men, but you also have the speed and the agility and the, you know, the toughness, and it's just such a different game that the US has. And we have a continual feeding system. We lose somebody and we've got somebody to take their place in a minute. So it also challenges those players on the team, where the other countries just have, you know, their 15, 20 players and that's it. They know they've got a lock on the team or the position on that team. So their incentive to, you know, get to the next level is not as great as somebody that knows that somebody's knocking on their door and is going to take their position. So all of these things JJ kind of instituted, and it's been successful. So we're hoping for a successful, you know, run again in a couple of months when we get to Beijing.
It's a wonderful, and we talked before we started, we were fortunate enough to be involved in one of the first tournaments at the Leafs Ice Center. Mike Durkin had the boards on actually JJ's rink. It's a JJ O'Connor rink, to be able to have move the guys in and out, change lines, and they weren't on the ice, but actually got to be on the bench, and the boards were clear and you could sit on the bench and we would move them in and out. And it was the most work, I told you, that I had done in a 48-hour period that I didn't get paid for. And it was the most wonderful and fulfilling thing that me and my daughter were ever able to do. And so to that end, how can people become involved, Jim? Get a hold of the Hornet schedule, or make donations, or what's the best way to, because once you are involved or you see it, you're never going to be the same. It just is that
I
way.
encourage people to well, just look up Hornet Sled Hockey on the website, but also look up, you know, if you're from Central Illinois, look up Central Illinois and support that team, or look, you know, Glass up in the Northwest, you know, area. You know, but obviously I'm a little partial to the Hornets, but, you know, go to the hornets.org, and you know, there's a place you can donate. We can also look at, you know, schedule the games, or make, you know, some calls. And we'd love for you to come out. Now we play, like I said, we don't charge our kids anything. So, and we provide them with all the equipment that they need. And hopefully, you know, when they go on trips, we try to cover their hotel rooms and stuff because they have enough expenses. We play high school teams. We play Bantam teams. We really can't really play anything below Bantam because it's tough for the little kids to set up in those sleds. But we play police departments. We're playing the Franklin Park Fire Department in a week. You know, so all kinds of benefit games. We just had a call today from the guy who runs an adult league, and he's got like 20 players that want to play us. So just give us a call. We'd be more than happy to do it. I want to tell you one little story too. So the word Paralympic, I always ask people this, because when they go into a player benefit game, I always ask the players, where do you think the word Paralympic comes from? Mark or John, any idea?
Paramedics?
Paramedic? No,
I'm not even going to.
I used to think paraplegic or paralyzed, but then I thought, no, they're not paralyzed. All the players aren't paralyzed. It comes from, by the Olympic Creed, 2 weeks to the day that they extinguish the flame for the winter or summer games, they have to put out the flame for the regular games. 2 weeks to the day, they have to relight those flames for the Paralympic games. Thus, it's parallel to the Olympics, and that's how they came up with the word Paralympic.
Wow.
So it's just a little bit of hockey trivia. You know, it's kind of cool.
There you go. Hey, I got two. First of all, Hope JJ's doing well. We got to know JJ. We spent that weekend at Leafs Ice Center and seen him around. And you
I'll
mentioned
make the
another.
announcement here real quick. He just got engaged last Sunday to his girlfriend.
Hey,
All right.
He was assistant. She was an assistant coach of his when he played plays power soccer. She was assistant coach for the Adaptive Sports Organization. So they just got engaged last week. So good for him.
Breaking news on Angles and Attitudes.
News.
The other one, Patrick Byrne. I nicknamed him the mayor. He, by the time his first game was done at the Leafs Ice Center that weekend, he knew everybody and everybody knew him. How's he doing? He doing well?
He is doing great. He is, for those of you who don't know Patrick Byrne, he's a one-legged Irishman. He has a great game of golf. Have you ever seen a one-legged golfer? He's phenomenal. But he also plays sled hockey. He was on our 2002 Olympic team that won the gold medal in Salt Lake City. He's a phenomenal individual, caring, giving. He built the program at RIC Blackhawks, basically himself and his couple of his teammates, but they've kind of put that whole program together for years. Great individual, and he likes to enjoy a beverage once in a while as an Irishman, and
an Irishman in him.
And he has a lot of stories to tell. But if you ever get to meet him, you'll walk away with a smile on your face.
He's just one of those guys that is so. If you took him out of central casting to put him in a movie for a Chicago guy, you just don't. You want to be around a guy like him.
And he talks to the Chicago lingo too. I mean, he's got that slang to him, so he's a phenomenal.
Yeah, he is. He is something special. He is something special. Hey, we could keep going and going. You've been great with your time, Jim. Our tradition here is John gets the last question. So, John, I'm going to give you a wrap up for Jim.
You got it. Hey, Jim, this was truly, like Mark just said, we could stay on here for 2-3 hours.
I've enjoyed it.
Oh, this is great. I got to tell you, when I first reached out to you, I was like, wow, what are we going to talk about with Jim? Like I said, Jim, we could stay on here 2-3 hours. I like the fact that you were the president after the Italian guy, Di Gregorio. Now we got another Italian guy after you, Trimboli. So you were the middle guy there between the two Italians. But I have to tell you, I read I can't remember the title of the book, but I want to go back to JG for something. And this is how I want to end it. It was by Tom Toohey.
Kiss of a Dolphin.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think there was a chapter in that book, and I read it, and it was about how the whole situation happened with JJ many years ago there, and how you came on. And I'll tell you, Jim, reading that book, I don't think I had a dry eye, reading that, and whoever read that and what you did. I have to tell you what you did for hockey and all the years that I coached at the Northwest Chargers. And when I was coaching at Conant High School, you always came up, and meeting you last year, really face to face 2 years ago at the Hall of Fame dinner. Incredible. My word for you, Jim Smith, is you're an inspiration to hockey. And I want you to continue to stay in every facet of the game, my friend. You were a great president, and keep it going.
Well, I appreciate that. But, it's really, I've been so fortunate to work with so many great volunteers. I mean, this sport, the heartbeat of this organization, I've always said, are the volunteers. And I've been so fortunate to work with so many great people. I mean, their passion for the game. It's like, I don't know what it is about this sport, but it's different than any other sport. I mean, I've coached baseball and, the other ones, and it's just, for some reason, I don't know if it's because we're in an enclosed cage when we play the game, different than the outside things, like we're gladiators or something, but it's just that people have a passion. It's different than any other sport. And because it's so long and we're together, it's like to many of us, it's our second family. So, and you treat people with that because they are your second family. So it's been I'm the one who's benefited more than anybody. I love being involved in the game. It's a great sport. I don't think there's another sport that even matches it, but it's really the people that are involved that I've been so honored to serve with. So
there's no greater tribute. My father-in-law, 91 years old, to John's point, a first generation Italian. He finally figured out, he says, you guys joined a cult in September. And then depending on your season, I'll talk to you either in April or May. And one other thing, our daughter got married in May, and my parents at the wedding, and my parents like, who's that? And I just went, hockey, 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 hockey. And they're like, okay, we'll stop after, because there were more hockey than actual family named.
And that's why we do it.
From rink owners to referees to everybody in between. So we thank you for being the final guest in 2021. We wish you and your family the best for a prosperous 2022.
Yep.
And we'll see you down the road then.
You also. Thanks, everybody. Have a great,
Thank you,
great
Jim.
New
Thank
Year.
you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jim.
Mark.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.